it's their abiding love and a dedication to the friendship that their one message, and I was here. I didn't make any fuss about my timetable and schedule, so I appreciate you very much and appreciate your work that you're doing. I would also like to thank you all, and also Aryaloka for being such a generous host and the center of spiritual learning, as well as social, the tinge of social, or the spice of social, socialness, the sociality that is being carried along with. And I think one of the reasons I think the Sangharakshita and the Aryaloka Mahasangh could connect was because of, I think, the amount of social work and the social activism that they carried out in India. That one of the probably younger generation noted Ambedkarites, the Dalits, who are Buddhist actually, they are part, or they have been part of Aryaloka Buddhit Mahasangh, as well as many tend to be influenced by its work. And I think one of the evidence to that is Nagaloka, where we could see, and a few of my friends are very well connected to it. So I was there, I was in Pune, and now I'm here again. So thank you. The talk that I designed was about how did the Dalits, who were now Buddhists, on the conversion happened on 14th October 1956, and they were Buddhists now. Excuse me, after 4 hours or I think 5 hours of ceremony. So what was this? It's an immediate turn. And how did they experience that then in 1956? But more importantly, also what led to the understanding of Buddha as a figure, in a way that could help us understand many facets of human suffering, which was not unique to one particular group. It was human-centered, and bringing that humanity part of your own individual suffering is what I think Ambedkar did when he embraced Buddhism, where he went to the core of what it means to be human, what it means to practice being the human, and how to elevate the essence of a human being. And I think, in effect, one of the oldest surviving discrimination is caste. It dates back, since we talk about the emergence of Vedas, today in modern language we call it Hinduism. The emergence of Hinduism is actually it produced the suffering of untouchability about the larger masses. And this group continues to be suffering, continues to be tormented. And in this extreme form of violence, everyday violence, humiliation, and moment-to-moment suffering, a community that has been suffering, what religion should I lead them to, was a question for Ambedkar. And it was a question that was in his mind for 20 good years. It was a question that could not be addressed by some religious dogmas only, or some other religious preachings. And so this man tries to think, and I think Buddhism becomes the best choice because it offers spiritual healing to this community, which is witnessing lynching, which is witnessing arson, everyday rapes across the community, rapes on their own daughters in front of the eyes just because they are subjugated to this caste order, and wives being asked to been summoned to the landlord's house before even she mates with her own husband the first night. So these are the kind of experiences which is very much very visceral, and so if we have to talk about these experiences, I thought we should talk about also. There was this famous quote after the Dalits became Buddhists. The amount of immediate turn it took, and they started identifying themselves as Buddhists. Yeah. We are no more Dalits, we are, and we are proud Buddhists. And being Buddhist came with responsibilities, and Ambedkar kind of prescribed them what your responsibility is, but also they claim Ambedkar to be a Buddha. And it's quite interesting, and even the monks facilitated him as being a Buddha, which has acquired the Buddhahood through this amount of work he has done. I'll come that in this talk, and of course, please feel free to interrogate and ask more questions. I think that's what it is primarily meant to. The conversion or the adoption of Buddhism was considered as Dhamma's revolution. After getting defeated in 2 parliamentary elections, Ambedkar was unwell, and seeing the pitiable condition of his community, he decided to dedicate his life, later part of his life, in the mission of spreading Buddhism. His dream was articulated in Marathi word Buddhamay Bharat, the pan-India, making India a Buddhist India. He saw the importance of political struggle in the post-independent nation making. Simultaneously, he sought the emancipation of the cancerous society by working towards strengthening its spiritual needs. Thus, he went to the radical yet non-violent method of Buddha. Ambedkar decided to lead the conversion on the auspicious day of Dashera on 14th October 1956. Ambedkar's conversion in Nagpur was not one event only with regard to the conversion of Dalits to Buddhism. There were simultaneous conversions in various parts of India. Ambedkar himself led 2 conversions, one in Nagpur and the other in Chanda, a few hundred kilometers from Nagpur on 16th October, where he got 300,000 more people converted. In Nagpur, he got 400,000 odd people. So there is disputable figures. Some say 300, some say 400, some say 500,000. And the reason we don't know is because the management, the city management that were hosting it, had no idea how to control this crowd now, because they had not anticipated this. So let's go with 400,000. However, Nagpur also invited visitors from across India who were close to 400,000. Their arrangements in Nagpur became a heavy issue of city management. They were housed in tents, in schools, in people's houses, government properties, wherever place was available. Of the visitors, it was claimed that 1/3 were women. The sizable presence of women in the audience demonstrated the fact that women were readiest to leave the thraldom of Hinduism. Their everyday humiliation accounted to more suffering and considerable repression. Ambedkar came to Buddha primarily because he was fed up with the tyranny of Hindu religion. The Hindu order established caste-based distinctions to further enforce hard-wiring discriminatory practices. It was the discrimination that Hinduism imposed, and it legitimized this practice by imposing its self-declared rationality down into the throat of oppressed masses, the untouchables. The rationality was assumed as a character of society, thus the distinction of division of labor was essentially communion of laborers, meaning the character of society was this, which is divided into these hierarchies, and it was presented as a rational thought. Even today, when you talk about caste-based discrimination or caste system, you will find people making it as a character. This is how a society is characterized, and making it as a workable model. When we go deep and when we interrogate the question of the lowest or the woman, there remains an absence in regard to this question. Hinduism preached the society surrounding God, soul, and life after death. Ambedkar, in his interview to BBC, said that this was essentially marked for enforcing the differences existing in the society. The lowest was told that his situation is lowest because of his past deeds, and he needs to make it a religious duty to sacrifice his current life in order to claim a good future, the next life. The God, soul, and life after death, Ishwar, Atma, and Swargajivan, are cardinal to functioning of superstitious dogmas that one can easily fall to. Ishwar and Atma, God and soul, proffered immediate fears, and it offered solutions too to get rid of those fears. The Ishwar and Atma continues even now to play a significant role in the philosophy of human suffering. The subaltern masses, the lower masses, who are deprived of the worldly benefits and material needs, acquiesce to the gods for the betterment. They go to the God. And the soul becomes a capital for exploiting the masses. Gods are the fears that one can hinge upon. The availability of so many gods specializing in almost every facet of life suggests modern system of industrial type operations predating in the Hindu society. The neoliberalism that has brought specializations of any sort, right from industrial job to teaching to preaching to other jobs of qualifications, is primarily inspired from these Hindu CEO type gods who are running the industry of fear. The issue of reproduction, anxiety, bad omen, work, positiveness, mindfulness, relationship, good lucks, bad lucks, all have a god in Hinduism who is invested in specializing the epistemology of such a fear. Thus, the modern archetypes of distribution of specialized labor is seen explored in the ruckus of market-driven grades. In India, the reason we have 33 million gods is because there is one god assigned to each act of human being. So there is a god for food. There is a god for if you are suffering from some mental illness. There's a god specialty, and we actually have temples. And especially in Vidarbha region, there are these small pockets across India. You can see, and I was recently, I was fascinated that the woman who was not having a child was actually having a goddess that she was praying for, and also they go to gods too. So in every and this person was not getting jobs, so he had to go to a god who offers good luck. So there's a good luck god too, and this is all capitalized on the very axiomatic notion of fear. Fear is soul. So Ambedkar, journalists asked the question to Ambedkar about the metaphysics of religion and its relation to God. When Ambedkar declared that he is going to Buddhism, Ambedkar responded that God was not here to provide food to the Dalit hunger, and the myth of God did not offer satisfactory answers to his inquiry either. On the other hand, Buddha, Ambedkar said, commanded scientific and rational thought. One of the primary reasons Ambedkar keeps on going back is Buddha offered this scientific temperament to his thinking. This learned Ambedkar, he examines critically all the religious texts he has. He examines the lives of Muhammad and Jesus and all the prophets. And then for him, whenever he goes to Buddha, he comes back with this conviction that this guy is actually setting me free. Even though I'm going to Buddha, he's not offering me this compulsion. He actually, one of his speeches, many speeches, but his speech he gives in Nagpur. In that speech, he says that the good thing about this is Buddha is asking the people to be enlightened by themselves. And then he says, using that analogy, I don't want you to be the blind followers who are following me and embracing Buddhism. I want you to enlighten yourself first about the merits and demerits, and then follow me. So this was not a conversion or a path to Buddha, not by some offerings or some material needs. It was open, and people had time. People had their own time, and that's what we can see when Ambedkar died in October, November, December, barely 2 months and few days after, there was simultaneous conversion in Bombay too during his funeral. So we see this kind of openness that offered. And for Ambedkar, soul offered the consolation of existence of beingness, meaning that beingness has to be distinguished from being. We are being, and there is another notion of beingness. Beingness is the habit of being. The existential notion of what it means to be being. And soul offered a consolation actually, it was like, yeah, we are existing. And this soul, concept of soul was very important because people were wretched groups. These were people who had no access to worldly benefit, worldly needs. They didn't have access to the luxurious lifestyle. So soul kind of offered that consolation. But soul also worked to impart discipline and crave submission to the higher authority. So soul could be used also for amounting further fear, and you could submit to me and I can set you free out of this. And thus soul was devil as well as God. The perennial effects of one's being juxtaposed around evil and faith was adequately purported around the imaginary emancipation of one's suffering. Ambedkar in his speech on 15th October, a day after he embraced Buddhism and led his followers too, he explained the reason for poor people embracing religion. Now there was a issue. Why are you going through religion? I mean, there was a lot of challenges in religion, and the revolution happening during that time, the communist revolution, which was critically examining the suffering, and religion is not important. And he says, religion, it was hope that was the most important characteristic that human beings strove for. This hope is often overlooked and remain unacknowledged. Hope is the singular factor that keeps one alive. Ambedkar says, life's goal is intermixed with hope. And I quote, if this hope is destroyed, how could one live a desired life? End quote. This hope is offered to the people, and if it is this hope that human beings crave, religion is there to offer this hope. Therefore, religion informs to the spiritual being of the masses who are poor and deprived. Referring to the Christianity, Ambedkar said the primary reason this religion spread in Roman Empire and in Europe was because it appealed to the poor and the oppressed. Hope is the most magnificent characterization. It is the prophecies that has kept alive. Hope is in despair as well as is in pain. Hope can be found in joy as well as celebration. Hope is found in radical tone and as well as liberal gesture. Hope in every vocation sound to the needful need of human endeavors. The needful need, the willfulness of needing. Hope is actually emphasizing on what it means to have an human endeavors constantly. However, hope was corruptible too and sold as a stale product to the hope-deprived untouchables. So hope was sold to the people who were hope-deprived. There was no vision, or there was no occasion to have a hope. So this was sold to untouchables. Hope was not a positive outcome, but it was relied on the mischiefs done by Brahmins to offer a hope of afterlife. So you are a Shudra, you are a lower caste, is because you have done something in your past life. So now I'm offering you hope. You serve me better because this is your responsibility as you're born in this caste. You will get a good afterlife. So on this very hope, Ambedkar is very convicted to the very and I think this hope is very much not explored within Ambedkar's thought, because this man is very hopeful. I mean, he's living his life. He's having defeats in his struggles. He's having constant ups and downs. He's going to Buddha, and then he's finding this monks being not being following, or he doesn't see monks as someone ideal characterization that Buddha suggests the role of Sangha should be. So he's very he's very depressed, and his wife writes about it. But he's very hopeful too, and I think that hope is actually the character, the marker of a Dalit community, the present day Buddhists. In addition to the Hindu indignity imposed upon the untouchables, Ambedkar went to Buddha because of the intrinsic value he was exposed to. Now there is a history why Buddha, people were questioning him, and he again explained it. His father, Ramji, a Subedar, was a stern, a military officer, was a stern believer, and who belonged to the Kabir lineage, Kabira. Kabir was a social reformer who had defied religious codes of suppression of the masses and did not believe in idol worship. Ambedkar's father, who was an officer in British Army, had imparted the values of religious education in the young Ambedkar. The curious mind of the student Ambedkar, as he was reading, witnessed conflicting views in the Hindu religious text that talked of dharma in Ramayana and Mahabharata, the two mythical texts. It were the episodes of violence, cheat, and recounting the greatness of Brahmins and Kshatriyas, with little hint to the Shudras and untouchables cast positive description that could be uplifting. Ambedkar did not like the characters of this myth, who he found were morally corrupt and inadept to humanity. Krishna, Bhishma, Drona were all scoundrels and unfaithful. Same went with Rama, whose behavior towards Sita was disparaging, claimed Ambedkar. However, his father found that the untouchable caste like Karna and Drona in the religious text were charismatic ones. These characters were given the status of human being in spite of their lower status. It's important. Once you are given lower status, you lose the agency of human being. But within this text, these two characters offered that, and I think his father thought this could, empower him. These characters, as Ambedkar observed, his father observed, wanted Baba Sahib Ambedkar or Bhimrao to take inspiration from them so as to remove the inferiority complex. Because if you are born in certain caste and you are told, you live with constant fears of inferiority. And he wanted them to remove this by taking, taking lessons from these characters. Given the influence of Brahmins and the influence also of Hinduism on people's mind, the Hindu thought was carried forward by Brahmins who converted to other religions. Now, this is important. Like when we talk about converting to other religions, the Brahmins who converted to other religions, they carried this dogma too. And that's why when we talk about the characterization of individuals, we can see those evidences in other religions in India across. Ambedkar found Buddha's significance for his scientific temperament and values of Buddhism, which was an important dot for the society to survive. Survival was very important. Ambedkar believed that if humanity is crushed, in larger humanity is crushed to such a pathetic virtue, the society has to count its days. And I think that's where he got with this larger humanitarian understanding that I think Buddha would help us. Or else we could have had, violent clashes so far, And I think the credit has to be given to the Buddhism that Ambedkar did. Or else, the communist type revolution, if it would have come, we would have had bloodshed all across India, civil rights violence happening. Because most of the Maoists in India are belonging to the Dalit community who are not Buddhists. And the tribal people who are oppressed by caste system as well. And these are the people who are perpetuating violence. But the majority stock, the educated and the thinkable and influencing class among Dalits has not gone to that path, and most of them come from the Buddhist background. And this credit has not been yet declared by the mainstream society about the effects that Buddhism had done on the Indian society at large. The three tenets of Buddhism, Prajna, understanding against superstition and supernaturalism, Karuna, compassion, and Samta, equality, was considered to be the important principles which was useful for countries who are suffering under the behest of historical atrocity. This is Ambedkar making a case as to why Buddha. And then he said, because these are the three qualities I can find in Buddha, elsewhere I cannot find this as explicitly as mentioned. However, in spite of the political conditions, Buddha was not appealing to the masses. The slow progress of Buddhism, Ambedkar argued, was due to the immense amount of literature that was available. Unlike Christianity, that had a Bible that one could refer to and get hold of its depth, Buddhism had the issues of importance that was difficult to grasp very easily. And Ambedkar said, because of this critical text that we have, Buddha, which was so vast, it was difficult for us to sit on one text and have Sunday sermons and finish it. And I think that's why. And he actually suggested. He suggested that we have to launch a Buddhist school of thought, wherein, of course, the Mahabodhi Society, which is one of the existing organizations of Buddhism in India during the times of Ambedkar, had actually written letter. And Ambedkar suggested him that we should have various translations of this text. We should appoint translators, and also we should have people who are laymen but who are committed to the cause. Because this way we will be able to spread Buddhism into deep. Because even today, presently, I don't think many people have yet gone to the intellectualism of Buddhism. Many people, especially in the community that I come from, they recite the verses, they know the meaning of it, but the critical thinking, the pedagogical, or rather the epistemological thinking has, I don't think, gone enough into depth. And I think Ambedkar envisaged that, and for this reason, he foresaw that this vast, smart religion is not getting audience, and one of the reasons was also because Buddhism was a faith-based tradition that transcended to the ritualistic practice only. That was eventually, it was a ritual. And he was like the monks who were idle and isolated from public life, were responsible for the decay and decline of Buddhism, argued Ambedkar. During the interview again to BBC in 1956, Ambedkar said that poorer interpretations and ideal teachings were not presented to the general public. The poorer teachings was one reason, and the ideal interpretations of the text was another reason. Neither the social reformism proposed by Buddha was discussed as one of its important tenets. The social aspect, the reformatory aspect of Buddha was not discussed. Owing to this reason, the revival of Buddhism could not be everlasting, commented Ambedkar. The Buddha's gospel is essentially a social gospel which benefits the larger humanity. So you can see there is this allusion, he's alluding that Buddha is not only this ritualistic practice as religion only, it has this important social fact. And I think one of the reasons we see Ambedkar becoming this figure is because he's adding the exponential or the emphasis on the social aspect of Buddha, and that's why his book Buddha and his Dhamma, which initially called Buddha and his Gospel, is actually teasing out the social rationalities of Buddha, and that's why his interpretation of religion becomes important for us to take stock when we talk about the global Buddhism. The spiritual aspect of Buddhism played an important role for Ambedkar to consider or adopt Buddhism. Given his interest in engaging thoughts with religion, the Buddha made a rebellious and lasting effect on Ambedkar since grade 5th. He read the manuscript on the life of Buddha, which was penned by his teacher Dada Keluskar, which was written for the Baroda Sayajira Oriental series. So he was facilitated when he graduated. He was the first untouchable to graduate with fifth class. And when he passed 5th grade, it was a celebration. Nobody had done that, and so everybody gathered. And then he didn't like the facilitation, but then he was given. And during the facilitation, one of the prominent historians of that time, Dada Keluskar, who wrote a biography of Buddha, offered him that book. And then he read that book since 5th grade, and he said that had deep impact on his mind, and that was constantly subconscious as he was acting, And I think one of the reasons he was the most non-violent leader, by the way. And the credit is given to Gandhi, but the credit should also come to Ambedkar, because never in his life he led a violent revolution or a violent struggle. People were coming and beating him up for the civil rights that he was fighting for. He led the mass with peaceful procession. Ambedkar is perhaps the only leader who denounced violent methods of action in the independence struggle of India, as well as the independence struggle of the untouchables within the larger Hindu India context. And I think for me, many people say that he was not courageous enough to do that. But I think the Buddhist subconscious are working. You can eventually win over. Let's keep steadfast. Let's dedicate our time to our cause. And I think this very Buddha became a spiritual experience for Ambedkar. Every time and I think we have to interrogate the subconscious Buddha's influence on Ambedkar's activism since grade 5th, whatever is written about him, and how Buddhism could be interpreted in his action. And I think that might help us understand how it played an important role. Ambedkar's constant engagements and repeated jibes at the monks and Buddhist practitioners was related to the losing morale of spiritualism that Buddha preached. His critique of Buddhism dealt with decaying characteristics of the monkhood. He was very critical of monks. Wherever he goes, and he's actually he's seeing these monks living very ideal. He's like, guys, you gotta come out. You have to lead the Buddhism. You have to tell the people what Buddhism is. Just don't sit in one corner and live your a lonely life. In the quest of attaining. And he gives a quote which I will say in which I will pick. Maybe there is one here. There was also a question of spiritual and the secular, because what it means to be spiritual, what it means to be secular. And so on the question of religion and secularism, Ambedkar preferred the earlier. The law, for example, is secular in nature, which could be broken because it offered the docile bodies to be controlled. It not only reverenced respect before being punitive in nature. However, religion, on the other hand, was sacred and thus demanded respect from various quarters of the society. Due to the influence of religious dogmas, Ambedkar proposed for sacred turn to religion. The market-based rules are determining the forms and quality of our relationships. One is in contact with the other purely in the interest of market needs. Love, relationship, purity of faith is losing grounds to the excessive market control greed order. Thus, the everyday interaction is based or premised upon the set of rules decided by higher up. The moral order too is seen depreciating. The moral codes which should define the moments of relationship is seen to be undermined. Therefore, to revoke the rule which was based on secular nature of market, we demanded the religious order to take over, which comes as a form of solace and reassurance to the otherwise paganized moral. Buddhism in India is celebrated for its revival of humanitarian ideas and radical equality. It is also celebrated for its anti-Hindu, that is, God, soul, life after death, superstition, supernaturalism phenomenon that is capitalized by the Brahmin class. Thus, to understand the impacts of Buddhism in Ambedkar's and his followers' life, I decided to survey the early months, as I was saying in the beginning, as to take stock of cultural change which Buddhism offered as a mode of reinventing self-identity. You became very powerful because these bodies who were untouchables, when became Buddhists, they started calculating their worth and they started asserting it. Before, when you assert, you had a threat to your life. Even now, if a Dalit woman or a man is asserting him or herself, that's an immediate threat to the status quo of the order, and that's why we see a lot of murders happening within the Dalit community, not within, on the Dalit community. Conversion to a new religion was the most important event in the late life of Ambedkar. His in-depth grasp of the subject and his personal experience spoke to the wider experiences of the community. Those critiquing him for religious conversions, who said, you ought not to do this conversion, are the ones who had seldom faced untouchability and had little to do with the causes and experiences of social marginalization. Ambedkar's introduction of Buddhism is earmarked as a liberation moment for the Dalits. The spiritual healing of the lynched communities was a matter of immense consideration in his choice. Healing was the important intervention to soothe the wounded minds and bodies of the wretched of the earth. It was religion that could bring solace and affirmation in oneself and in the collective humanity. No material desire or the earthly needs would heal the immense amount of entrenched suffering and deep feeling of alienation one could erase. The lynching and Ku Klux Klan style arson was a regular occurrence in the Dalit communities. Bhaurav Gaikwad, a newly convert, narrates an incident in an article published in 1956, which was titled From Satyagraha to Conversion. Bhaurav describes the enormous injustice and physical violence hurled upon the untouchables. He's describing an incident. The untouchables had no right to religion. Barring the untouchability, wherein an untouchable shadow was not allowed, the untouchable groups who wanted to have their own right to religion, like separate practice of the same religion. Fine, you don't want us to come into your temple because we'll pollute you. We'll have our own practices. Even that was impermissible. So in 1931, in a village, Mukhed, the untouchable groups decided to have a procession of Pandav Pratap Tuk, their own religious kind of procession. Seeing their procession, the caste Hindus and more specifically Brahmins took offense and attacked this procession. The untouchable people who were part of the procession were in bloodbath. In addition, the sacred procession was burned down too. It reminds of the horrific and horror images of the KKK burning the cross. Thus, Ambedkar started laying the path of his conversion from Hinduism. He initiated a non-violent Kalaram temple entry satyagraha, one of the most important satyagraha, where he said, allow us into the temples. We are also Hindus, we are also devotees, we just want to get closer to God, we want to offer prayer to God by entering the temple, and untouchables were not allowed. Because you are just untouchable. You can be a devotee, but devotee from outside. You can pray to the God and make sure your shadow doesn't fall onto the temple. So you had specific timings where the sun is at its some angle where your shadow is not polluting the temple. But Ambedkar here is leading the mass, and he's refused, and then there is a violence because you can't enter the temple. So that march or satyagraha was started on 2nd March 1930. That lasted until 10th October 1935. For 5.5 years, the protesters chanted Jai Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram to no avail. Ambedkar then called a conference in Yevla, Nasik on 10th October 1935 to declare that the satyagraha would be stopped and that he would renounce Hinduism. Following this, in Mumbai and Pune, various conferences endorsed Ambedkar's move. During this time, Ambedkar started consulting with various religious texts. Now he said, I'm done with you guys. 5.5 years of this torture. I don't want to be part of Hinduism now. Now this sends a threatening message, you know. Now if anyone is smart and wants to still have this, they would have, you know, allowed the entry. The Hindus still don't allow, even after this threat, you know. And Ambedkar is firm now. So during that time, from 1935 onwards, that is actively seeking to convert. So from 35 onwards, whatever he's doing, one of the thoughts that he's constantly having is to convert. You know, and that's why wherever he's going, he's collecting materials, he's having dialogues with, and he's reading, and he's consulting about what to do with this community. Because this was the most important event that he had to do. Back in 1952, Ambedkar then decided to convert to Buddhism. He gave discourses and held discussions with his followers for 4 years before finally doing a communal conversion. One of the things that he did to execute the project was to change the name of his periodical, Janta, to Prabuddha Bharat in 1956, on 4th February, a few months before conversion. And the important aspect of this experience of democratic Buddhism that he brought to people was, he didn't impose. This is what I think, what do you guys think? Let's have dialogue, let's have critical conversations, what do you guys think? And then during this public discussions, you know, and various conferences attended along with his, you know, supporters and followers, he thought the democratic, you know, enunciation of Buddhism could be one of the ways, which he did eventually. Prabuddha Bharat, for example, the journal that was titled Prabuddha Bharat, the Prabuddha India, commemorated conversion to Buddhism in 1956 in its special edition. It entitled the special edition as Ambedkar Buddha Diksha Special Edition. The special edition was Ambedkar Buddha. And that's what I was saying, Ambedkar as a Buddha. That's why. Why is it so important? It was published after about 2 weeks of the conversion on 27th October 1956. It carried photographs, reportage, opinions. Actually, you know what? I have that for you all. You guys can have a look. Actually, this is the edition. And this is one of the, you know, this is Ambedkar's Buddha. And the difference of this is one of the Buddha that you can find in Naglok. That Buddha is standing, not only standing, he is in motion, he is walking, and he is with his open eyes. So this is a social radical Buddha that Ambedkar anticipated. You can, you know, and all over, you know, you guys can have a look at photographs, you can circulate. This is also another one I have, but it was after his death, but we can have a look at it. So when Ambedkar died, the same Prabuddha Bharat carried another, you know, special edition, and this is how it looked like. Ambedkar died, and, you know, at the feet of Buddha, and so it carried the photographs as well. So you guys can have a look. So the editor of the newsletter, V.C. Kamble, declared that the contemporary Buddha was Ambedkar, taking from Bhikkhu Chandramani, who observed that Buddhatva was offered to Buddha for his dedication and hard work. Similarly, by acquiring knowledge, Ambedkar had attained Buddhatva. The Buddhatva was very important here because Ambedkar is now a part and parcel of Buddhist universalism. He is not a Sanskritized Vishnu. He is not Sanskritized Jesus. No, but he is part. He is Buddha, and they want to claim, they want to be part of this larger Buddhist humanity, you know. And his followers did that job very effectively. In his 2-hour long speech a day after the conversion on 15th October, that was hosted in Nagpur with a population of more than 400,000 and spread across 14 acres and 3-bed 49 by 20 tents. Ambedkar addressed to his people, covering various issues from the reasons for selecting Nagpur, the 22 vows, the disrespect accorded to untouchables, the Buddha, rights of newly converted Buddhism, what will happen after you convert to Buddhism, where your rights of constitution go away, the perils of Hindu religion, Karl Marx, why religion is important to the poor, why Buddha is appreciated across the world, donation of 1/20th income for the betterment of community, the future of the country, democracy and dictatorship. He covered all these issues in his 2-hour-long speech. Ambedkar converted to Buddhism by reciting the Pali verses. Turning to the crowd, Ambedkar addressed that he had taken the vow in Pali and thus invited them to follow him as he recited things in Marathi. That translation formed in a way as a part of 22 vows, which detailed information about his version of Buddha's interpretation. So if you have to understand Ambedkar, how he understood Buddha, we have to engage, or we have to rather understand what he meant. He gave 22 vows. 22 vows. Nobody had idea. I was told by the people who worked with Ambedkar's committee, that was a conversion committee, as to why he only had 22 vows. And that was not part of the plan. That was very, I think he kept secret, and next day he just gave. His interpretation of Buddha to the layman could be found in these 22 vows, along with the most important attack on Hinduism to set free the superstitious thraldom imposed by Brahmins controlled on Hinduism. What are those? I will just quickly read so we have a fairer idea. First vow is, I shall have no faith in Brahma, Vishnu and Mahesh, nor shall I worship them. First attack, first vow. To hell with Brahma, Vishnu and Mahesh. We don't care about them and I will not worship them. Second, I shall have no faith in Rama and Krishna, who are believed to be the incarceration of God, nor I worship them. To hell with Rama and Krishna too. Doesn't stop. Third, I shall have no faith in Gauri, the female version, the Ganpati and other gods and goddesses of Hindus, nor shall I worship them. To hell with you also, Ganpati and Gauri. Then he says, I do not believe in the reincarnation of God. Because you see, Hinduism, the reason it could reproduce 33 million gods was because there was always reincarnation. There was no reproduction, but there was reincarnation. Well, of course, there was reproduction. Some of the stories talk about Ganpati being the child of Shankara and Saraswati. I know what's her name, Shankara's wife. Whatever it is, I don't know. But there is reproduction happening. But incarnation is more important to sustain, and that's why in this reincarnation he proposed it, because according to Hindu religion, Buddha is the 9th incarnation of Vishnu. So Buddha is part of Hinduism, and then there he goes. No. I do not believe in the incarnation of God. Fifth, I do not and shall not believe that Lord Buddha was the incarnation of Vishnu. I believe this to be sheer madness and false propaganda. This is the vow. Sixth, I shall not perform Shraddha or nor shall I give Pindan after someone dies. You have this ritual ceremony. He's like, no, we are not going to do that. I shall not act in a manner violating the principles and teachings of the Buddha. This is where the 7th actually Buddha comes in picture. Actually, from 6th onwards. When he says, I shall not perform Shraddha nor Pindan, he is actually cutting the job opportunities of Brahmins. Because Brahmins rely on this kind of profession. By this vow, Brahmins are worried now. We don't know how to work hard. We just know how to recite the verses. And now this man is taking our bread and butter, which is full of exploitation of people. And that's why there is also another critique that he follows. But here he says, I shall not allow any ceremonies to be performed by Brahmins. Because Brahmins commanded over each and every ceremony. You have a new house, Brahmin will perform. You have a new baby, Brahmin will perform. You have a new business, Brahmin will perform. Someone dies, Brahmin will perform. And Ambedkar says, no. I will not allow any ceremony to be performed by Brahmins. To help with you Brahmins too. The Buddhism comes here. I shall believe, 9th, in the equality of man. I shall endeavor to establish equality. I shall follow the noble eightfold path of the Buddha. 12th, I shall follow the paramittas prescribed by the Buddha. 13th, I shall have compassion and loving kindness for all living beings and protect them. 14th, I shall not steal. 15th, I shall not tell lies. 16th, I shall not commit carnal sins. 17th, I shall not take intoxicants like liquor or drugs. I shall endeavor to follow the noble eightfold path and practice compassion and loving kindness in everyday life. 19th, I renounce Hinduism, which is harmful for humanity and impedes the advancement and development of humanity because it is based on inequality, and adopt Buddhism as my religion. 20, I firmly believe the Dharma of the Buddha is our only true religion, is the only true religion. 21, I believe that I am having a rebirth. 22, I solemnly declare and affirm that I shall hereafter lead my life according to the principles and teachings of the Buddha and his Dhamma. Now there is no Sangha here. You see, Buddha and Dhamma is there, there is no Sangha. And there is this incident as to, and Sangha was worried, and Ambedkar is, Sangha has to take responsibility now, I am leading this, and the Sangha should be very happy now, people are going to be converted, are they ready yet, and I think this important, many, we discussed with few monks, and they acknowledge that, the laity of the monks during that era was one of his, one of the reasons of his critique. So after pronouncing this, he expressed joyous feeling of accepting Buddhism. Thank you, sir. It was to escape the hell, claimed the learned doctor. It was the day of hope. He then urged to his follower that he is not in the need of blind followers. Whosoever was interested in Buddhism was invited to come with an understanding of the religion only. Speaking on the Hindu religion, Ambedkar said, no one can claim to have progressed and liberated in the Hindu religion. No one can come and say, yes, I'm a Hindu and I'm progressed and liberated. Then it's not going to happen. It didn't happen. This religion, Ambedkar said, which is Hinduism, was destruction in its very foundation. Whereas Buddha's doctrine did not carry inherent caste biases. Among the population of the Sangha during Buddha's time, 75% were Brahmins, whereas 25% were belonging to the lower caste, Shudra and Shudras. Buddha addressed to his Sangha to overlook caste biases. Drawing analogy of rivers culminating into ocean and becoming one, Buddha told, same was with Dhamma. You are different rivers, but when you come into Dhamma, you are part of this larger ocean. One prominent critic directed against Hinduism was that it not only accorded the untouchable status, but its inhuman characteristics that declared human beings as lowest. It's very important. There is one untouchability, and the other is human beings which are lowest. That means the humanness is there, but you are still low. And when you are low, you are not equal. So there are these two dichotomies, and Ambedkar teases out this. One is untouchability, that you are untouchable, you are not part of the society, you are not part of a human ecology. But yes, if you are a human being, you are lowest. And this is the paradox that Hinduism offered. While pronouncing these words, it was reported that Ambedkar's voice was heavy and his eyes sparkled tears. It suggested to his own struggle against a system that overlooked his human sensibilities. We can go flashback to this doctor, a PhD from Columbia, studying under with John Dewey, Edward Seligman, this prominent American intellectuals of the 20th century. He comes back home and comes as a military secretary to work, has a law degree. He comes back home and he's not offered a chair to sit in the office because it's untouchable. He's not offered a house. He goes to England, gets another PhD, gets enrolled into Gray's Inn, gets a bar at law degree. Then goes to Germany to get another doctorate. Owing to funds, comes back. Now this man, guarded with so much heavy degrees, comes back home and is still an untouchable to the person who is the cleaner, who is the peon, who is the lower on the lower echelons of job. And when Ambedkar is saying that they accorded lower status to human beings, Ambedkar is perhaps the flashback, I've come this far, and imagine about my other people, who don't even have basic education, what could have been, and then that's why he's feeling that Buddha, away from Hinduism, we are liberated now, there is a hope. And I think hope is something that still carries, in our beings. The snowballing effects of conversion, which also considered also, I mean, they say, let's not use conversion, one of the bhikkhus in one of the ceremonies. Let's use voluntary acceptance of Dharma. Because conversion had this negative connotations that Christian missionaries that converting are offering this, some material needs. And this was true, that the voluntary, because during that time, the untouchables were also converting to Christianity. Within the, Andhra, kind of, East Indian, and also some parts of North India. And I think that distinction was important because the untouchable communities were no longer hooked to a life of bondage. Buddhism brought sense of self-worth. Now you are claiming you are worthy of something. Because before you had no exist, you had no knowledge of yourself. Because you were tied to a farm, to a landlord, or your children were perpetuating the same laboring work that you have been doing. And so your work was not there. Why? Because you couldn't have a place to have grievances. If you are a worker, if you are a laborer, and if you are not happy with this, you have a place to go and claim that, hey, I'm not having this proper amenities, I'm not getting equal pay, let me talk. This was absent in the life of untouchables. So the human being, so the humanness, the selfness was absent. So even if you're working, you are just working. That's it. There's nothing apart from that. And so the self-worth is very, and this is what becomes kind of a radical, and when we talk about Buddhism, when we talk about today, it has created a radical sea change within the minds. And that's what the people who became Buddhists, they became a complex where they can fight odds. And the surveys were saying the people who converted to Buddhist were having the most social upgraded status. Second generation Buddhist, and Jaya Harshila is one of the examples here. This is what it did to you. It upgraded. There was also this Ambedkar wanted. It was his last project to make India, pan-India, a Buddhist India. For him, because if you have Buddha, you will not have caste-based biases. You will not have, and you will eventually follow a path that will not bother anyone else's path. I want to attain enlightenment, or I want to do this work. I do it by my own. Other religion, Hinduism for example, it doesn't follow this path. It wants to see how well are you doing, and let me make some problems in you. And this is what is happening in current context. Also, with the emergence of fascist RSS regimes in India, this kind of heavy, and currently there is again a malignation happening where, because the influence of Buddhism increased so much, because people, especially the Hindus, were very unhopeful of Buddhists, the newly converts' future. They thought these people will be converted, and within a few decades or a few years they will leave this Buddhism, because they can't keep up with this Buddhism. We as Brahmins couldn't keep up with Buddhism. How can you guys keep up with Buddhism? Was one of the, but they kept. And now what's happening is seeing the emergence, and Buddhism is being spread across, and especially the untouchable, the Dalits, the newly converted, the new Buddhists, are taking Buddha to other corridors of society. The people, and we can see the people who were not Brahmins but lower than Brahmins, who were oppressing them, are the people who are now embracing Buddhism, because they can see the difference. They can see that these are the kind of nuisances that the Hinduism has done. And when this is happening, the Hindu regime is now there. As I said, if you are walking on your path, they want to go on your path. They are making fake monks. And what the fake monks is, these are the monks which are sponsored by the Hindu regime. So these are not actually monks. These people are trained to go and malign the Buddhist virtues, what it means. And the photographs, and social media is full of it. And recently, there's a documentary on YouTube actually. This guy made a documentary about fake monks. So these monks are drinking. These monks are, having a very profligacy life, sitting and enjoying, and then you see their image with the RSS chief, Mohan Bhagwat, trying to endorse that we are part of larger Hindu community. So Buddhism is also part of larger community. And this could be possible had Ambedkar not given 22 votes. Ambedkar rejected that, we are not part of Hindu. We are not you. We are we. We are separate. We are Buddhist, And this Buddhism brought forth this value. But again, in India, we have Buddhists who are also living in metro quarters. Now, when we talk about Buddhism, we have to talk about the equality that if you are a Buddhist, I'm a Buddhist, I don't feel like you are a person other than human being. I look at you primarily as a human being, as a common quest to understand Buddha and his life and his mission. In spite of this, we see the other groups there are Buddhists in India, but not all of them are Dalits. But not all of them are Dalits, or who are those other Buddhists? And how much have they created social osmosis, the social interaction with the newly converted Buddhists? And we see there is this existence of caste-based biases, even among the, and I don't know if anyone had that experience, but maybe you can share, where a person who was not a Dalit but a Buddhist had some favorable opinion about, Ambedkar's conversion, or the Dalits. I knew my friends who were not Dalit but who were Buddhist had like Brahmin type stereotypes about the Dalit Buddhist, and they would reproduce the stereotypes as, these people don't know how to, even if we gave them Buddhism, it's not us, first of all, the othering, and they have not yet grasped, over this aspect of, Buddha, and there is always this feeling as to what kind of, because these people are tied to certain other schools of thought, maybe in Japan or some other schools of thought, and when they look at, they should be happy, we are now a larger community, let's work together, but we see that's not happening. One final point I'll make before I conclude, because Marx is very important here. 1950s era, the world is divided, the communism and capitalism, and then the third world movement is growing. Marx's communism and Buddha's Sangha was put in parallel by Ambedkar. Ambedkar believed that the Sangha is the most organized socialist structure one can look for. Comparing the communist revolution of Russia that brought about bloodbath, Ambedkar claimed that Buddhism offered communist-oriented revolution without producing violence. You want communism? Go to Buddha. You don't have to take weapon and kill each other. Buddha is essentially actually talking about communism way of life. But you want to take weapons, and he's actually critiquing, he's actually challenging Russia when the world, and people are going crazy. Whoa, this guy, what is he talking about? He's challenging us, our revolution. But Ambedkar was point on. Buddha's doctrine enunciated improvement of social conditions, but this remains incompletely analyzed, said Ambedkar. Buddha's thoughts are social messages, and due to the lack of grasping of this issue, there has been dividing understanding of Buddha, claimed Ambedkar again. Once the gospel of Buddha is understood, then it would be able to convey the desired message of Buddha. This is where he was saying, we have to make interpretations of Buddha accessible to public, because Buddha is essentially talking about how to remove, because he said, the communist revolution wants to eradicate poverty, and that's why it wants to impose violence on this oppressive class. He said, poverty is going to be still there. Even after revolution, poor are going to be still poor. But what do we make of this talk? What after this? And he said, if you want to live a life which is sustainable and stable, Buddha's communion-oriented, inspired Buddhism was something that he found, very important. Now we see the growing interest in the Western world on Buddhism, and more so, India-originated Buddhism. The Indian geography becomes a marker of reverence and respect. It is the Indian state that is known for the constitutional mandates that were heavily influenced by Buddha in Indian constitution, and we can see the government of India's official logo, the emblem, the flag, President Palace, all is designed and centered around Buddha's originality. Addressing to a crowd of Third International Buddhist Gathering held in Myanmar, Ambedkar reported to the 27 country representatives that his efforts to recognize Buddhism as integral part of Indian culture is to be clearly seen when we look to India. The Ashok Chakra, the emblem, is all coming from the Buddhist, and this is the originality, even now, at the President Palace and also. He actually started the project of making India, the Buddhist India, by making it a constitution, and that's why he says, the notions of equality, fraternity, liberty, he has learned this from his master, Buddha. And when he's giving this symbolic references to Buddha, he's actually making that project slowly. Unfortunately, he dies, and that's why I couldn't see that. So the natural affinity has to be recognized with the measurement of one's inclusion in Buddhism. Buddhism remains corrupted by the dominant caste in India, who do not offer fellowship recognition to the Dalit Buddhists. There is no non-Dalit Buddhist who openly affiliates with the Dalit Buddhists. It is a caste-based prejudice that these people bring to Buddhism. The Buddhists have achieved significantly. It has triumphed from being an awkward society that seeks to interrogate the inhumanity simultaneously aligned with fellow believers. Some try to find the awakened path. Some critically examine the Dalit movement progress. All in all, it exhibits Ambedkar's rationale of Buddha's ethics, which is to find a medium and a non-violent path. The Dalit group has not evoked any willful violence. It has been constantly evoking methods of democratic protest and eventual liberation found in Buddha's doctrine. If the service to Buddha was anticipated, then Ambedkar firmly believed it was the message of Buddha's propagation of humanity, which was laid in Dhamma, that needs to be our consciousness. Thank you.